Hello and welcome to another episode of Clean Talk. I'm your host, Brad Whitchurch, and we are recording live from the Seal Shield Studios in beautiful downtown Orlando, Florida. Today is July 10th, 2023. Very excited to have our guest today on Clean Talk. Jim Colantoni is the co-founder, chief strategy officer, and VP of sales for PURO Lighting. They're doing innovative solutions around UV lighting solutions. And Jim, we're really excited to have you on Clean Talk here today. Welcome.
Really appreciate you having me, Brad. Thanks so much.
Well, it's a real pleasure to have you on the show. Jim, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your background and why you're on Clean Talk here today.
Yeah, so background, we started the company PURO about 5 years ago. We started it with a focus really on health and wellness within occupied buildings. So really the goal was let's use these specialized lighting technologies, UVC primarily, but we didn't know where it was going to go from there when we started the company. And let's turn it into something that's going to really help people in the space. That was really the original goal. So all of us came out of the lighting industry, and we saw this unique technology that we had the ability to take to market. And we didn't really see anybody else doing it at the time, right? So this is pre-pandemic. And so really we didn't have that, drive to disinfection that we all saw, honestly, as young dads. The biggest thing that popped into all of our heads were we got these kids in daycare. And that wasn't the first place we went to with our technology, but that was really what drove. I wish that we could clean these spaces or disinfect these spaces a little bit better. So that's really where we all came from.
Well, interesting timing 5 years ago. So just before the pandemic and of course, as you said, focusing on daycare. I think that's a great mission and a great history. We are going to talk a little bit about the impact of COVID and where that's taking the industry. But I really love the technology that you guys have come up with. You mentioned that you didn't see a lot of these products in the space. We've seen since COVID, obviously, a lot of UV type solutions. And a lot of people don't realize it, but UV radiation has been around for a long time. Back in 1895, Niels Ryberg Finsen started using UV to help with tuberculosis. And he actually received a Nobel Prize for that in 1905. And UV was a common solution until the advent of antibiotics. And now, of course, with antimicrobial stewardship, we're trying to pull back from the antibiotics that are starting to create superbugs as pathogens become immune to the antibiotics. And we've come full circle again, back to what UV can do for us. I love what PURO Lighting is doing with that technology. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the technology and some of the products?
Yeah, so we really focused on installed solutions from the get-go. During the pandemic, we sort of got brought into how do we portably use these as well, just because it was easier for people at the time. But really our core focus is installed solutions. So putting things in the ceiling, putting things on the walls. That led us, I know I talked about daycare, but that really led us to operating rooms first and foremost. So healthcare had the biggest need. They had the budgets. They'd already really deployed UV for 10 plus years in a big way. Xenex, TrueD, Surfacide. Those guys did an amazing job of really getting the technology out there, getting the research done on what.
Those are all whole room disinfection solutions.
Correct. Yeah. So whole room disinfection solutions, but portable, right? And so we saw the need certain spaces within healthcare that had this extra time, right? So again, they had 4 or 5 hours, 6 hours every night where you could disinfect that whole room and you didn't need to get in and get out as fast as humanly possible. But because I could install it, I could do it on a schedule. I could do it every single day. I could do it on demand. I didn't need that full-time employee to move those devices around. So that's really where we started from a technology perspective, was disinfecting those whole rooms, but installing it. All of it was done from an unoccupied perspective first, right? So technology that was not safe to be in the room with. And then we really expanded pretty rapidly into far UVC with partners like Acuity Brands and Ushio. So we have been deploying now far UVC in these spaces as well. So now we have sort of that 1-2 punch of high intensity, deeper disinfection on demand or on a schedule, but then also continuous disinfection in those same rooms.
So let me take a step back. I love the concept of the installed solutions. Once you get through the logistics of the install, then you're helping to alleviate the issues that we're seeing around staffing, right? You don't need staff members to be coming in and managing the disinfection process. It's largely automated when the room is vacant. But you mentioned far UV, and we're starting to hear more about far UV, but I'm sure that many of our audience members aren't familiar with far UV. Maybe they've heard of 222. Can you tell us a little bit about far UV and how that's different from the other UVC technologies that you mentioned?
Yeah, so traditional UVC, a lot of people hone in on 254 nanometers specifically because it's been around for so long. It's tried, it's true, it's tested, tons of research around it. But there's also other types of UVC that's not safe to be in the room with. You can use pulse xenon for the same type of UVC, broader spectrum, but it's still unoccupied technology. But you also can use LEDs, right? So there's plenty of LEDs that are out there that can be in that space as well. Far UVC is using specific technology, krypton chloride, that has been developed really over the past 10 to 15 years. And in that space, you get a giant peak at 222 nanometers. If you filter out everything that's bad above the 222, you can really get a very safe, secure way of disinfecting these spaces without risking anything to the human skin or the human eye. So over the past 3, 4, 5 years, there's been tons of testing, tons of research that's gone on to say, okay, how safe is it? We have always known it was safer, but how safe is it? And so recently the ACGIH took those limits up 7 to 10 times. So now we know that it's safer. We can use it in different ways to really disinfect these spaces while people are in those spaces the whole time.
So you mentioned a lot of the whole room UV disinfection systems use a broad spectrum solution, and that 254 nanometers is really the height of germicidal activity. But now we recognize that at 222 nanometers, you're able to have germicidal effectiveness without hazard to the person, right? So that's the unique area of the spectrum where we don't get damage to our skin or our eyes. And that's been validated now as being safe for people to be in the room with UVC if it's the 222 nanometers. Do I have that right?
That's correct. And as long as it's filtered, right? Because again, those lamps by nature will produce a little
broad
tiny
spectrum. Yeah.
So we got to really hone it down below 230 to make sure that it's completely safe for everyone.
Now, do you use an LED to get that specific wavelength, or what type of bulb solution is that?
So today it's krypton chloride is the technology.
Chloride. I'm not familiar with that. Can you tell us a little bit about krypton chloride?
Not enough on this to make it interesting. I don't want to pretend like I'm a scientist.
Okay, well, I don't know either, but we do know that mercury-based bulbs are really the industry standard for broad spectrum. We utilize LEDs for specific narrow spectrum, and we'll have to do some research on the krypton chloride. It has a cool name, so I'm sure that's super effective. But more info on that, we'll have to check with Dr. Norman Horn, our UV expert, and we'll get some data on the krypton chloride. But I think that's very interesting. As far as I know, are you guys the only ones that have commercialized currently the 222 far UV solution for full-time room disinfection, or are there others in the marketplace?
No, there's certainly others. So I would tell you we have anywhere from 5 to 10 competitors that are trying to do it in some unique way. Some people are doing it, installing it on walls, or some people are trying to make a handheld device that's safer, right? We really are going towards this whole room disinfection mentality, installed solution mentality, make it look good in the ceiling. We've partnered with Ushio out of Japan. They really have done the majority of the research that's available out there. They make the lamps that we use inside of our fixtures, and they do an amazing job to continue pressing the research. And so we're doing lots of things together with them on demos and deployments and things like that, so people feel really comfortable under this light.
How challenging are the logistics of providing an installed solution?
So we typically don't do the install itself, right? So we really are a lighting fixture manufacturer. That's how we've seen ourselves since the get-go. So the challenge becomes making sure that everybody in the chain that is involved with, should we deploy this, And then how do we deploy this is really educated. So we're talking to architects, we're talking to engineers, we're talking to people that manage the materials on site, owners representatives within a hospital, for example. And then we do have to talk to that contractor, right? That electrical contractor, the facilities teams, and really talk about how are we going to do this install. We are fully involved in that entire process, and we're either on site or supporting them in every way while the install's happening.
Do you find you have more success with new builds, or are you effectively able to retrofit other facilities?
I would tell you in the healthcare industry, new build, major renovation, I don't want to say it's easier, but it definitely flows a little bit easier. And then we do retrofits. I would say most of those are usually in smaller facilities or outside of healthcare.
Okay, great. But you have a lot of other solutions beyond just UV room disinfection solutions, right? Can you talk a little bit about what you're doing with air?
Yeah, absolutely. So we were not in air previous to the pandemic, right? So we disinfected the surfaces and the air with our devices, but the pandemic really drove us to air disinfection. And so we spent a lot of time, energy, engineering team put an amazing amount of work into, okay, how are we going to deploy UVC both in HVAC systems, but also in rooms to really help stop the spread of COVID? That was the original intent. What we found out along the way is, this has been done for 40 years already. How do we make it a little bit better? That's been our goal. That's been the engineering team's goal. And really all you can do today easily is make the deployment of it easier, make the installs easier, make it more user-friendly. So we're using 254 nanometer mercury-based bulbs inside of air handling systems right now, both for disinfection of coils, but also if the customer wants it for disinfection of the airstream as well. But there's a true energy save. There's a true ROI that the customers can get from that. And that's really what we're selling today. It's much less about COVID, even though we're giving them improved indoor air quality. It's about that energy save of stopping the growth of fungus and mold on the coils themselves so that airflow can happen more freely.
So you have a retrofit UV solution for the air handling system, correct?
That's correct.
And that solution primarily is disinfecting the coils, which has benefit. You also mentioned airflow. That can be a challenge. Can you talk about how you accomplish that?
I mean, really, it's math, right? So I'll tell you, before the pandemic, we would have told you can't do it because that's what everybody always told us, right? But none of us are naive enough to realize that we're not the smartest people in the room, right? We know we're not the smartest people in the room. But what we found out just through research and science and math was you can disinfect the airflow as well. You need to have the right amount of energy. Am I going to disinfect the airstream that's moving, extremely fast as well as I will that surface? No. But can I get a 90% reduction? Can I get sometimes a 3-log reduction depending on the pathogen? Yes.
And it's not just retrofit solutions. You have some other air purification technology as well. Is that correct?
Yeah. So that system could go into a retrofit air handling system, or it can go new construction, right? So when that air handler is shipping, most OEMs are installing UV from the get-go. We think we make it way easier for those OEMs before it even ships. But then we have an entire offering of in-room solutions that you can install, whether it's retrofit or new construction, where we're disinfecting the airflow in the room itself. This primarily is done with UV, but we do have some HEPA solutions as well. And then through our acquisition, we were acquired in January by a company called Applied Ultraviolet. Through the acquisition, they have a whole set of technology that's PCO-based, photocatalytic oxidation. And that technology has been used in food preservation and post-harvest applications for wine, for example, for years to really help make sure that food is lasting longer, but also to protect those environments at the same time. So it's less about transmission of a pathogen person to person and more about keeping those facilities clean and safe.
And PCO, photocatalytic oxidation, an interesting technology developed by NASA, I believe, for crop propagation on the space station, if I'm not incorrect with that, and now being utilized for disinfection in healthcare and other environments. And so through the partnership, you have access to those products. Tell us a little bit about the acquisition. So you guys have been around for 5 years. You have a robust product portfolio, and now you've teamed up with some other companies in the space. Tell us a little bit about that acquisition and what that means for PURO Lighting moving forward.
Yeah, so acquired by Applied Ultraviolet. I think we closed at the end of January. It was, I think, any acquisition, like the sort of the waves of everything that's happening. I think you've acquired some companies, so it's sort of some ups and downs along the way. But once you get to it, I think everybody was super happy with where we landed on both sides. Right now, it's really making sure that we can fully integrate these companies, which takes time. But there's really a couple different divisions within the company. I'll be in that healthy buildings division. That's where I'm now VP of sales domestically. We have an entire international team as well. So that team is incredible. So there's VP of sales for the international side as well. So really it's the integration of all these things right now that takes time and energy, and sometimes takes away from how we want to be selling constantly. It's all we want to do, and we want to be growing the business, but we need to get these done so we can be stronger later together.
Well, I think consolidation has been something that is certainly, we're going to see more of it in the industry. It's been a largely fragmented industry, largely as a result of COVID. But I think it's inevitable that we're going to see more consolidation in the industry, and you guys are certainly leading the way, putting a bunch of solutions together to help improve outcomes for healthcare customers.